World of Tanks console. Almost 1 year since the introduction of modern tanks into World of Tanks console. How is it faring? What are your opinions? And of course, we're going to be checking out everything that you kind of have to cover when we try and ask this question. Now, first things first, let's talk about the matchmaker itself, because ultimately you have to talk about the player numbers, how many people are actually jumping into Cold War, to kind of analyse how well it's actually going. And of course, you guys, when you're jumping into the game, you know what the queue times are like for the various different eras. If you've played any number amount of games, or if you've even just jumped on for a few games, you know that typically it takes quite a bit longer than if you were to jump onto World War II, but remember there are multiple different matchmakers that you have to take into account when you consider Cold War. There are effectively 3 different matchmakers, of which the player base is split into various different segments, and of course there are a lot more premium Cold War vehicles in Era 2, so a lot of the players will be kind of shifted down into Era 2, as you would expect with World War II tanks, in the form of the Tier 8 premiums, and a lot of people playing those. And of course you get the same sort of distribution where a lot of people are playing the tier 10s in World War II. The equivalent is obviously Era 3 in Cold War, a lot of people progressing up the tank lines and playing the pinnacle tier, of which is supposed to be the best. And of course those of you who are trying to earn a ton of silver, and that's something we'll talk about later on within this Cold War video. So with the caveats now out of the way and what kind of things we have to take into account when talking about the player numbers, there's still a very much lower number of players that play Cold War, but it's definitely significantly more than when the game mode was first introduced. Probably partially down to the fact that Wargaming have continually been promoting content, creating content, almost not forcing players to play exclusively the Cold War game mode, but of course if all of the new content is Cold War, all of the new development is Cold War, all of the operations that yield like crazy amounts of silver that are going to progress you through tons of World War II tanks are all on Cold War, then players are going to typically try and play it at least to the best of their ability. And that's why you're probably seeing quite a few people jumping in, giving it a go and testing out this new kind of game mode, or at least can we even say it's new? It's been around for nearly a year. So overall, I think the player numbers are okay. It's not considerably less than World War II. It's probably in the region of 60-40, World War II being the 60, Cold War being the 40. That's obviously very speculative. Wargaming are the only ones with the actual numbers, but from my personal experience with the queue times, with factoring in the fact that there are 3 different matchmakers, how typically long it takes for each of us to get into a game, the amount of players in the queue every single time you jump into Cold War, because you can see that, yeah, it typically seems like there are still more players playing the World War II version, which is understandable. It is the core game, or at least was the core game for over 7 years, and of course with the introduction of Cold War, has kind of become the new arm of World of Tanks console, and primarily where Wargaming are testing out all of these modern tanks to see if people can actually play the game as a more modern based game. And I think that that's the direction in which Wargaming have been dragging it. Now, whether the introduction of a new senior kind of executive producer who's going to be replacing Pain God since his announcement that he will be leaving Wargaming, whether we'll see that direction shift over the next year is kind of seen to be kind of understood yet. We'll obviously have to wait and see. Whether that's a good thing or not is obviously down to your own opinion as to which way you think it's going to go. Is it going to go even more one-sided towards Cold War, or is it going to be remaining kind of equal to regards to season passes, kind of content development, etc. Talking about content development, you guys, if you've played World of Tanks, if you've been constantly harassed by the amount of new tanks, I've seen plenty of comments with people being like, oh my god, another new tank line every single week. It appears like we're getting a new Cold War tank. And yeah, that's pretty much because there are so many more Cold War tanks out there, or at least modern tanks in current use, and of course in the period since World War II that Wargaming have been delving into and kind of taking a look at, introducing into the game. There's a lot of repeaters that we see on both World War II and Cold War that they kind of start the line off with and then build upon them, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but you do end up playing the same tanks every now and again, as you may have already unlocked on the World War II version, which is a little bit annoying, and as well the fact that you have to actually purchase them on that game mode as well. Yeah, it's a little bit painful for your bank account, but but I kind of guess that that's why you get so much more silver in Cold War, and that has to be taken into account. Of course, the prices of all of the equipment is pretty much the same on Cold War. The only difference is that if you want to upgrade your tank, if you want to buy the next one, they're typically a lot more expensive, which can be very costly if you only play World War II to kind of grind out your silver and then you jump into Cold War. Obviously, if any of you have completed any of the Season Pass rewards to get rank 100 rewards and rank 75 rewards, there have been plenty of Cold War vehicles that were released, which is good, premium-wise, that will allow you to gain like a ridiculous amount of silver. And actually, we're going to have a video focused entirely on how you can maximise your silver and never be poor again on World of Tanks, and also talking about the economy, how Cold War has kind of affected that in a separate video, because we can literally condense it and really do a full analysis of how the game has developed from the introduction of Cold War specifically to the silver that you earn every game and stuff like that. But this one's featuring mainly on whether Cold War is a good feature, whether it's bad, whether the whole kind of game itself is going in the right direction. What do you guys think? I don't know if you're more newer players, have all of the old players left the game and you're pretty much one of the newer ones with by new I mean within like the last 2 years since update 6.0. for those of you that can remember that's when basically Wargaming wiped the game. They introduced new graphics, they basically absolutely caned the game into the ground, completely destroyed it for about 6 months probably. The game was like barely playable and they were introducing new features. It was like they launched a beta version of a full game, given the fact that the game had been out for like 6 years, and they introduced that back into the game. It caused a big upset with, of course, the loyal players, but then again, you know, we're now looking at similar sort of server numbers to before that, and so I don't really think that there's been much of a change, and Wargaming's mentality is to just bring in new players to pay for everything by just jumping in, paying like 50 quid, and then they never play the game again. It's not my company, it's not how I would personally want to do my games company, but it obviously works. That's why Wargaming are a multi-billion pound company, and yeah, I don't really know what else to say. Is it good? Is it bad? Obviously, you can make your own mind up. I've seen plenty of comments. I agree with quite a few of them, much to my kind of annoyance that I have to agree with them. But yeah, there's definitely some negative comments that can be said about a lot of decision making from Wargaming. Granted that there are some good decision making stuff going on as well. It's just very, very kind of it's not in the forefront. A lot of the bad mistakes that have been made are always in the front face, and some of the better kind of updates that have actually really improved the game have been kind of more passive and slow and generated over time, that you just don't really see unless you kind of played the game, stopped the game for like a year, and then you come back and you're like, oh wow, this game has actually got way better than when I last started playing the game. Anyway, regardless of that, I feel like we went off topic, but it is very relevant to discussing about the Cold War game mode, because obviously after a period of time, Cold War has been generally improving a massive amount, and actually I don't disenjoy playing the Cold War game mode. I just don't find it all too thrilling. I feel like it's a lot to do with more fast-paced action that doesn't really take much grey matter. You don't really need that much brain power to actually jump in. I feel a lot of the kind of reward of kind of learning different things within Cold War has been kind of taken away. It's very aggressive gameplay where like you were rewarded for literally pushing into scenarios where you probably shouldn't, and albeit I'm not an expert. I'm probably not going to be able to compete with some of the best players in Cold War. I just haven't played it enough. Not saying that if I did, that I would be the best player in Cold War, but yeah, I think that there is definitely a problem with the fast-paced nature of Cold War and the kind of YOLO mentality where like people get their games ruined so quickly in the game that it makes it a little bit annoying if you're trying to actually perform and learn things and do strategies that should make sense, but because someone's YOLO'd down the map in an FE4211 that is nigh impenetrable and a premium tank that is just way stronger than a lot of the tech tree tanks that are in the game, then it's not very fun. Similarly, getting launched by about like 4 missiles from one singular tank that has an auto-loading missile launcher that's also a light tank, it's not very fun either. But equally, there are some very unbalanced tanks in World War II, and of course this is the beginning. There has only been a year's worth of development, a year's worth of balancing, and it's only now Wargaming are deciding to actually jump in and actually alter this. I kind of want to make sure that I'm giving a holistic view, because I could just sit here and slag off Cold War, but it's not really constructive. Just because I don't play it, there doesn't mean that there isn't value. There are plenty of you guys that actually play Cold War almost exclusively, which I think is actually pretty good. I actually enjoy Cold War. I think it's one of those where you can play very casually, like I don't have to pay any attention basically at all, but I can still have fun, and ultimately that is what Wargaming's kind of strategy, I guess, should be, is that jumping onto the game, you don't have to pay much attention, you can play it very casually. Remember, Wargaming's target genre audience, whatever it is primarily casual players. They make up like 90% of the player base, so for those of you probably watching this video, we are like 10%, because you know 90% of players never even search it on YouTube. They just jump on, they play in their tank, probably with some of their mates that they've got in real life potentially, and then they just play away, leave the game, play, you know, couple games a night, and then that's them done. No other kind of interaction with the game. That's primarily what it is. That's Wargaming's kind of strategy with audience, I think, and I can see that on my channel. A lot of the audience of the World of Tanks console community, at least me personally, I think the average age is about 40 from what I can see on my channel analytics, which showcases kind of the demographic of players that are playing this game. It's not a kind of... It's not a super kind of competitive game. It's not meant to be that. It is an arcade shooter that is primarily there for your enjoyment, and if you don't enjoy it, stop playing. That's my kind of idea. I probably have stopped playing quite a few times where I just stopped enjoying playing the game. It's not worth you grinding through tons of hours where you feel like all you're doing is battering your head against a brick wall. You know, take a couple months off, come back. There's plenty more content for you to jump into, and you'll probably start enjoying the game a lot more. There is no reason to just hate the game that you're trying to actually enjoy. So yeah, take that from my personal opinion. And obviously the most important thing for you guys with regards to Cold War is making sure that you don't feel pressured like you have to get to Era 3. There are so many other vehicles that you can play. You can stay down at the lower tiers. There is loads of vehicles, and I mean really, really novel ones, really cool ones that are completely different play style from what we've seen in the World War II. That is what I kind of love about Cold War, is that there is kind of like a sandbox where you can play so many different ranges of vehicles. And I do enjoy that. It would be nice to see like a sandbox version of World War II where we could just jump in and play with random vehicles that maybe would be a little bit overpowered, but would be interesting to see in like a kind of event that maybe came out. You know, it'd be interesting to see a mouse that was able to travel at like 40 kilometers an hour just for like a limited time event where you can just jump in like one mouse going 50 kilometers an hour against like, you know, a ton of light tanks that can only go like, I don't know, 20 kilometers an hour. There could be so many endless possibilities, and I think that that would be really interesting to see, just from a standpoint of making the game fresh, bringing in new content that is new and exciting for both new players and veteran players that actually still play the game. Yeah, would be really, really interesting, bringing in challenges and stuff And you've seen that really heavily with Cold War. We've been seeing the introduction of premium bonuses, events. That's the first one that's ever been released so far, which is for the M1A2 Abrams recently. And of course you can then see some premium bonus events where you can get 50% more XP in silver when going towards the T72BU as well. So these events, they've slowly started creeping into Cold War, and I think for the most part Wargaming's development strategy from this point onwards will be focused almost kind of entirely on Cold War. You've seen a lot of the World War II tech tree lines, like the double barrel tanks, like the Yo tanks, been pushed so far back that we've basically had like 4 years behind where the PC version of the game is, and I think that that's what Wargaming Console are trying to do, is to push away from all of the other game modes. Whether that's good or bad, you can make up your own decision and let me know in the comment section down below. But yeah, I think it's interesting to see where Wargaming are going. Do I agree with everything? No, because obviously I enjoy the World War II version the most, but I would have rather have seen them add on to the World War II version rather than make like a separate game mode where they split the player base and you either play World War II or you play Cold War. There's no real in between, you either play one or the other, because there's no real overlap, and trying to make it both of them work at the same time, grinding through both tech trees can be very difficult, and of course it's very time consuming to be able to do. So I think that, yeah, most players would have liked to have seen them just add on to tier 10, make it tier 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, blah blah blah, whatever it could have been. I would have rather have seen that. Anyway, it's in the game, it's how it is, and we'd kind of just have to put up with it at this point. But yeah, the primary focus of this video was to just talk about Cold War, see what your guys' opinions are, and overall I think I'll give my opinion, and that is that Cold War is definitely improved. It's definitely worth playing. Do I think you should focus all your time on it? No. Do I think that World War II should be your primary focus and that you should never play Cold War? No. I think you can mix and match. Just be sure that you probably won't have enough time to go through both tech trees, especially with the silver that you have to grind out to be able to earn some of the top tier Cold War vehicles. But just take that into account. Obviously, let me know all of your thoughts, any questions, any queries. Have a good discussion in the comment section, as you always do. It's really interesting to see some of the comments. I can't reply to them all, but I do read through pretty much every single one. If your comment gets held for review, it's usually because you put in some profanity. YouTube basically remove it. I don't usually go through and add in the comments because they're usually pretty toxic, but try and keep it PC if you want your comment to be shown on the video. I'm not going to open it up because it opens up a whole can of worms when I just allow everything to be put in the comments. But yeah, make of it what you will, and of course thank you very much for watching this video, and I really hope that you check out some of the other videos on the channel which cover both Cold War vehicles and also World War II vehicles. Predominantly World War II, but you can see all sorts. And of course the update news covers every single video, update news, new tank, etc. that's covered on the video. And of course, thank you very much once again for watching, and I'll see you there. Goodbye.